The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. We've got a lot of NBA news to get through. We also had a pretty eventful weekend in the sports world. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. Joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, is Tom Brady actually retired? You know Tom Brady probably better than anybody I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, it hit me. I was like, man, now that's it. I'm like older than all the athletes that are left playing sports now. And then they put the brakes on it. So again, my read on that one is he wanted to do something and it came out before he wanted it to. So now we're kind of holding up, kind of like Gordon Hayward signing with the Celtics back in the day. Chris Haynes reported it, and then everybody was like, "No, hold on,
wait a second."
And then hours later, he finished video games and wrote his thing for the Players Tribune. So, but yeah, man, I don't know, but who day, huh? The Bengals.
Oh man, that was a shock. Certainly a surprise. So now we get Bengals and Rams in the Super Bowl. I know a lot of people in the Southern California area were not sad to see that the Rams got through to the Super Bowl and the Bengals are going to be there. I mean, never would have predicted that. I saw it was something that was out there. Like if you had bet $1,000 before the season started on the Bengals making the Super Bowl, it would be worth like $65K today. Something.
Oh,
crazy.
I think it was more than it was like
it's something crazy. And then I saw people were putting out. Somebody had this crazy parlay where they nailed both the score of the Chiefs-Bengals game, which who would have picked the Chiefs to win, right, to begin with, and the score of the Rams and 49ers game, and it turned it like a $20 bet became, it was something like $580,000, like unreal. It's like winning the lottery.
Hey, good for them, man. Just invest in NBA Front Office Show. Send a little our way if you're watching, and we'll take care of you with some good NBA news. Want to dive in, man? Because there's a lot of. I mean, I know it was a football weekend, but we got a lot of basketball stuff to cover here. So let's get into it.
We're gonna do some news first, and then we're gonna break teams up into buyers and sellers. So we're going to look at these categories, and there might even be some kind of subcategories within there as we kind of dive into it that we'll have to talk about. But I guess the thing to start with here, Goran Dragic, sounds like the Raptors are fairly confident they can find a trade for him. Now, I do wonder, though, because from day one, the moment he became a Raptor, speculation was he's going to get bought out. How much of this is the Raptors saying, no, we're not going to buy him out. We definitely have a trade here. So anybody who wants him, man, we've got something. You better come trade for him if you want him, because he's not going to be on the buyout market. Doesn't mean it's not true, but just this time of year, you kind of have to take that sort of thing into consideration.
Exactly. No one is getting bought out a week and a half ahead of the trade deadline. Everyone has immense trade value. The reality is he's on a $19.4 million contract. It's not an unmovable number, but that would have to involve the Raptors probably getting involved in a bigger trade than what they're likely to make this year. Now, I never count out Masai Ujiri. If anybody's going to take a home run cut, it's going to be him. So let's see. But my guess is there won't be a trade. He'll get bought out. And then as Mark Stein reported, we're going to get into a couple other things from Mark here today, but he reported that Dallas would be the front runner, but that there'll be plenty of competition to sign Goran Dragic. The only team that wouldn't be able to sign him is Miami because they can't re-sign him after trading him for at least 1 year. So now if he is traded somewhere and then bought out, that's a possibility. Then because he went on to a third team, as we learned with Andrew Bogut once upon a time, they could potentially re-sign him then. So let's keep an eye on that and see how it all plays out. My guess is we are 2 weeks from Goran Dragic having a new NBA home. We'll be clear of the deadline in a couple weeks, and it'll probably be within a day or two after that. He's, if he's not traded, he'll be bought out and allowed to go where he wants to go.
Yeah, I think that's probably what we're going to see go down, and it sounds like the Mavs are the front runner to land him if indeed that does happen. Now, Mark Stein also mentioned, though, that Jalen Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith are not expected to be moved by the trade deadline. There's been some speculation about that, some connection between Brunson and perhaps the Knicks. We've talked all about the difficulties the Mavs might have in re-signing Brunson after this season, but sounds like they are not in any rush to move him. Now, again, this time of year, no. We definitely don't want to move this player. Like that kind of stuff we have to consider. We've got to factor that in. But I also think that it's just tricky to try to move a player that's got the kind of on-court value that Brunson and Finney-Smith as well provide, but don't offer much in terms of salary ballast for a trade. That makes it kind of difficult to find a deal that really works.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the one help for the Mavericks is they do have a $10.8 million trade exception from the Josh Richardson trade to the Celtics this offseason. So that does help them a little bit because Brunson alone, he's at 1.8 million. So that's not going to do a whole heck of a lot for you as far as matching salary, but you could take, up to 10.8 million back. You using that trade exception. And Dallas is, let me look at it, they're about 15 million under the luxury tax line. So that's enough room. What I also thought was interesting is Brunson is not gonna sign what I like to call the Dinwiddie, others call it the Norman Powell, but the 4-year $56 million extension. That is that max number that guys who are under the average salary can sign for in an extension in season. And I don't blame Brunson. I think he's probably got more coming his way this offseason. That's about $14 million a year or so. So I think that's, the right decision for him to hold and see. I think the other day, right, we talked about it and I said something around probably 15 to 20 million is like where he's going to land. So, bet on yourself and see where it goes. Detroit Pistons, maybe, as a suitor for him. Let's see what that looks like.
I gotta wonder though, given what happened with Dennis Schroeder, isn't there some risk here too in doing that? Like if you think if you're getting an offer at 14 million per season and you think your range is somewhere between 15 to 20, assuming the market doesn't drop out on you or you sustain some kind of an injury, I mean, you're talking about potentially if you wind up with a $15 million contract, you could have risked quite a bit for relatively little reward here. So it has to be a factor in his decision making when you look at that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Schroeder had a much longer track record of success than Brunson has. This is his 4th season. He's had 4 good seasons. He's gotten better each year, but he's not a super high volume 3-point shooter. Last year he shot 40% from 3, but only just under 3 attempts per game. This year he's about the same volume, but he's only making 35%. Not bad, but not, anything where you're like, holy cow, this guy's a centerpiece of offense or anything. Yeah, exactly. Playmaking is ticked up. He's up at 5.6 assists per game. That's actually pretty notable when you have to factor in how much Luka has the ball. And Brunson plays most of his 31 minutes a game with Luka. So that is something to balance out. And his scoring hasn't really, been affected as he's added the playmaking because he's up to 15.7 points per game. For his size, he's one of the best finishers in the game. Does a good job getting downhill. He's got a nice mid-range game, working out a pick and roll. So let's see. I guess the difference is a little younger. He's had not some of the attitude issues, maybe, I guess is the best way to put it with Schroeder. Things didn't exactly end well in Atlanta for him. There were definitely things that the OKC was fairly clean his time there, but there were definitely things that popped up throughout his Lakers tenure at times. And some stuff has come up in Boston as well now. So, but yeah, it's a risk for sure. If you're Brunson, you have to really feel good if you're going to pass up that money. But I think I would, because I think that number is still there this summer from the Mavs, if nothing else.
Yeah, good point. Good point there. Let's move on. Let's go Justin Holiday, unvaccinated. He's been a guy who's been in a lot of trade rumors. Just the fact that he's unvaccinated, that eliminates, not technically eliminates, but could restrict some landing spots, right? I mean, we think about the Brooklyn Nets. That would mean he couldn't play home games, things of that nature. But I do think that this is going to be a factor in terms of his trade value and could be enough to scare some teams off of trading for Justin Holiday.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the asking price isn't unreasonable. It sounds like the Pacers are looking for 2 second-round picks. That's perfectly fair for what he can bring a team. For the vast majority of teams, he'd probably be a guy's got decent size. Has always been at least holds his own defensively. He's not, necessarily a great defender or anything. So that part would be good. But yeah, I mean, you take kind of the Nets, the Warriors, I want to say the Lakers and the Clippers, if I remember correctly, as well, due to their local mandates, guidelines, call them what you will. So yeah, I mean, now, are any of those teams necessary? I don't know. I guess maybe the Lakers, right? Because he actually does fit into their tradable or acquirable salary window, there. But yeah, I think it's just a data point you have to talk if you're a team of or where we're at. And he has made it very clear he will not be getting vaccinated a couple different times when he's talked about it. Just he doesn't think it's the right decision for him and his family. So that part kind of seems to be it is what it is. So yeah, everything else though, that becomes a question for the teams to decide.
All right, the Pelicans signed Wenyen Gabriel. So that's a little bit more depth there for them. Obviously not a major marquee signing or something like that, but certainly something to note. A guy who's got a bit of athleticism, long, can defend a bit at the rim and things of that nature. So worth a shot.
And that was one of those hardship 10 days. They've got a couple guys in the health and safety protocols. Couple people have asked this because it is kind of weird the way this works is if a player is already injured, like then goes into the health and safety protocols while injured. That happened with, I believe it was Michael Porter Jr. I think Jamal Murray was in the same boat. There's been a couple others as well. The team is then eligible for one of these hardship 10 days, even though that player's already out with an injury. I guess the theory is, hey, we said any COVID protocol absence, you get one. So that's just the easy way to do it. So that's where it's at. They've got a couple guys down with that, but so Wenyen Gabriel will be there for the next week and a half or so.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander dealing with a sprained ankle. He's going to be out through the All-Star break for OKC. Obviously a blow for them, but they're not trying to win games right now, so there's no reason to rush him back or anything, but just something to note that he's going to be out of action for a bit here.
Yeah, I think this is a sign of either this is to be ruled out already this long. I mean, the All-Star break, that's still roughly 2.5, 3 weeks away. To say that he's going to be out that long, that says one of two things. Either this is an extremely serious ankle injury, maybe it is, we don't know, or we don't really care about winning games the rest of the way and let's go. Now what's interesting is, right, it looked like for a while that the Thunder, because they had played well to start the year, and then the Rockets, because of that big win streak, had created a ton of distance between them and the Pistons and the Magic. But now all of a sudden you've got the Thunder have lost 7 straight. The Rockets have lost 7 of their last 10, including 3 in a row. And the Pistons and Magic have started to win a couple more games. So it's starting to tighten up. That sounds weird to say when it's for the very bottom of the standings, but tighten up at the bottom of the lottery odds here with those teams. And you want to get into that top 3, right? Because that's that's the flattened odds, and then the top 4 is what's decided by the lottery. So I think we can confidently say those teams will be the top 4. But what order goes in as the most ping pong balls, that definitely still seems to be determined, even though it looked like as much as a week or so ago the Orlando and Detroit had a leg up.
It is weird saying like they've got a leg up on the way down, but yeah, I mean that's what the tank race is. That's the way this goes. The NBA's race to the bottom for ping pong balls.
It's funny. It's like when people say, "Do you want a higher draft pick?" And I'm like, "What does that mean? Like is that like going towards 30 or is that going towards 1?" Like, I always think of it. That's why I tried to eliminate from my vocabulary and I tried to go to using better, because better is clearly the Well, I was almost just said it. I almost said the lower draft pick, but the going towards one is the better draft pick. But yeah, all right, let's move on before I stumble over the English language any further.
Wait, which Brooks is it again? What's going on there?
That was
oh
the best.
yeah,
that was one of the all-time NBA.
oh that was fantastic.
It was so
I mean,
good.
it wasn't fantastic for the teams and players involved, of course, but for everybody else in the audience, it was pretty fun. LeBron James out with knee swelling. Frank Vogel, we talked to him yesterday. He said that there's just swelling in the knee. They sent him back to Los Angeles before the game against the Hawks, which ended in disaster. But they sent him back to Los Angeles to work on getting some of that swelling under control. Have not ruled him out for Wednesday's game against the Blazers, but obviously swelling in the knee in general is not good. Not good. Oh, I'm getting choked up over this.
You're all choked up, man. It's okay. I'm sure he's going to be all right.
Well, knee swelling's not good. The MRI apparently had nothing on it, which is sometimes can kind of happen when there's swelling. It can be hard to see what's going on in there. Mm-hmm. So fingers crossed right now that it's not something serious and that it is just maybe a little bit of fluid or something like that they need to take care of. The other day before the game against the Hornets, he was out on the floor taking shots. And I mean, I would think if they believed there was something serious in there, they wouldn't have him warming up, trying to see if he could loosen it up enough to go. But we'll see. I mean, everybody holding their breath right now until we find out more about what's going on with LeBron and his knee, and fingers crossed that he'll be good to go for Wednesday.
Yeah, I thought clearly too. I mean, he had one of those tweets with a whole bunch of angry face emojis when they first announced it. I think it was at the Hornets game where they said he wasn't going to play. So clearly he feels like he could be out there going. I mean, this is the right thing if you're the Lakers, right? You don't make a small thing a big thing by pushing him through, even though it's starting to get a little bit harder to say it'll all be fine in the end as you slip in the standings some. But I think my guess is this is maybe just one of those things where, let's face it, I mean, he's old and he's got a ton of miles on his knees, and there may not be anything structurally wrong. It may just be hey, it's stiff and swollen, and we're going from there. I know that happens as you get older. Sometimes there's not a structural problem, but it just things don't work the way they used to work. I do wonder too with this if that leads more to it too, because there was no specific injury where they're like, yeah, it was with 5 minutes left in the previous game, he stepped wrong or whatever. There was nothing like that. So that to me says, yeah, let's see, where this ultimately, lands. But yeah, it's I mean, 24 and 27 though, that's not great. Still plenty of room clear of, sticking in the play-in race. That's not a concern, but that's, I mean, I think any hope now of moving up to 6, that's probably starting to go away. I think now your hope is let's get into that 7-8 and only have to win 1 to get in versus, hoping we can catch into the assured playoff spot of the top 6. I think 5 games is an awful lot to make up and have to climb the Clippers and the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go down the whole Lakers rabbit hole, but essentially what's happened is, I mean, they just lost 2 games that you could probably say, look, if LeBron had played, they win, right? The Hornets and the Hawks, they're probably winning those games if LeBron had played. And the problem with it is they've already burned through all of any margin for error that they had. They burned through that and then some in the first half of the season. So that's where it becomes especially damaging when you drop games that probably otherwise would have been wins in the second half of the season that you already messed up the first half of the schedule enough to where you don't have that margin for error anymore. So they're very fortunate that the West has been so forgiving right now, because this could look much worse if this was a typical Western Conference season, which it has not been.
Yeah, if the Spurs or the Pelicans or Kings were playing better, they could be in danger of missing out on the postseason entirely. Yeah, and that's a great point, and I'm with you because it's the same thing for the Celtics, right? It's when you're sitting right around 500, your margin for error, as you said, is completely gone. Like I look at it, the Suns, right? They play next tomorrow night against the Nets. If they lose that game, whatever. Who cares? It's not that big of a deal. We've built this cushion, this 3.5 game cushion now for the Suns, as they've won 10 in a row. But if you're now you're kind of fighting, you don't have the room to throw those away. And that also makes it harder on those nights when it's like, yeah, we should probably sit somebody out. We should probably take a rest night or something like that. You just end up in a really tricky spot trying to do that now, because you really need every single win you can get the rest of the way.
Absolutely. And that's the challenge that both your team and my team are now standing. You know what, Keith, for as much of a fun sports weekend as it was with football and everything, we had some rough time in Lakers land. The U.S. men's national team decided they didn't feel like playing soccer this weekend. Ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
That one got me, man. I was so angry yesterday because I'm let's move. I don't want to go on a soccer today. It's they better win on Wednesday. If they don't, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose it entirely, because it's just, now they should win Wednesday. They're at home against the bottom of the table team. It should be a win, but I mean, this team is just, I don't know. That Canada game was disgusting. Gross.
Yes,
let's move on.
Let's do that. All right. Derrick Rose expected back after the All-Star break. Hopefully that gives the Knicks a little bit of help there. And who knows, maybe the Knicks make a move before we even get to that point. But the rough news, and I mean, Keith, just watching this was difficult. Joe Ingles, looks like he's probably out for the year, almost certainly. I mean, based on what we saw, that's really, really tough. Before we get into all the trade ramifications of this, because what does this mean for Joe Ingles, the basketball player?
Yeah, I hate to ever say this about any athlete, because it's you don't know with this, but like Klay Thompson, right, suffered two what used to be almost career-ending or certainly career-altering injuries, back to back. But he was still young enough where you're like, he's gonna get back. He'll be okay. I look at Joe Ingles. I mean, he's 34 now. He'll be 35 at the start of next season. That's tough. 35 with coming off just going off what the folks who can watch those videos and usually get it right pretty quick said, probably a torn ACL. That's tough. There's already the rumors out there that he might be not retiring, but maybe done with the NBA, maybe go back and play in Australia at the end of his career, like Bogut did, like Dellavedova has done. That may be where he was headed, but yeah, I mean, that's just brutal, and brutal for the Jazz, because he's been just kind of a mainstay for them through this whole rise. He's been there for 7 years, and that's kind of coincided with them getting back to being a good team. And they're struggling now. It is I just had it. Here it is. They've lost 5 in a row. They've lost, I want to say 10 out of their last 13 or something like that. And they are, they're now
distant.
Games are unbalanced, but they're still in fourth, but they're only in the loss column. They're tied with the Nuggets, and they're only a game up on the Mavericks at this point. So, I mean, that's starting to get into danger territory of slipping out of home court advantage.
So, on the trade front, he's a $14 million expiring contract. Now we're talking Ricky Rubio territory here, where he's an expiring contract that you can move, but a team can no longer put any value towards him because he's not going to help you on the floor. But an expiring contract, if the Jazz decide they're willing to take on some salary, could still be a movable piece. But I'm sure this does change any negotiations that the Jazz were in involving Joe Ingles before this happened.
Yeah, because now you have to plus up the value somewhere else, right? It's going to have to come in the form of picks, or I was going to say young players, but they don't really have a lot of young players that have a ton of value that they could be thrown in a trade. So probably a pick. That part gets a little bit difficult because they already owe a couple picks in the future out to teams in trades. So yeah, it's a little rough. My guess is it was already heavily rumored that they were going to trade Ingles anyway. My guess is they'll still move on that, because then, like we said about Ricky Rubio, because he's an expiring contract and his deal will end, he could then re-sign with Utah this summer because he would be a free agent. That you don't have the 1 year wait on that when the contract expires. That's only if a player is waived after the deal. So that would be, we may see him then be able to come back to the Jazz, next season if that's what he wanted to do, and that's the direction the team was going. So my guess is probably very likely, because they've got to do something. You can't keep sliding like this. I mean, now they're 4.5 games behind the Grizzlies now for the 3rd seed. And I mean, we were talking a month ago about them fighting with the Warriors and the Suns atop the conference. And now, after a disaster month of January, they're barely going to hang in home court advantage. So, tough times in Utah for sure.
Yeah, the tiers have certainly shifted in the West. For a while, it looked like very clearly it was Suns, Warriors, Jazz were your top 3, and then you had the Grizzlies in a tier to their own, and then everybody else.
Yep.
And now that's switched. Now Grizzlies are in that top 3, and the Jazz are kind of in this free fall where maybe it's now your top 3 is Suns, Warriors, Grizzlies. You could even say Suns in a tier of their own, Warriors, Grizzlies in another tier, and then everybody else. It's interesting the way this is all shaping up. Just a couple more things to get to before we get to buyers and sellers. The Nuggets do get a disabled player exception for Michael Porter Jr. So, I mean, not a lot of spending power there, but maybe a little bit for them to go use if they so choose. I mean, better to have it than not, but I can't say this is a power shift or anything like that by getting this disabled player exception. They're not going to go pick up some impact piece, but maybe, for depth if needed.
Yeah, it could be a thing that it'll expire on March 10th, so they'll be able to use it during buyout season. So that could be a way versus just saying, hey, we have the same prorated veteran minimum deal as everybody else is offering. Hey, we can actually offer you slightly more, and that's helped in the past with teams doing that. Is that, maybe I have this wrong, but I feel like the Lakers were able to use one that was slightly more than the prorated veteran minimum once upon a time. Maybe a couple of years ago. I might be wrong on that, but that's why you go get it, even though it's such a small number, because unlike the standard exceptions, it doesn't prorate. It stays at that full amount, because the idea again is you're trying to replace a guy. Maybe that's their path to keeping Boogie Cousins longer than his 10-day contract. He had an interesting situation that I don't know if we touched on or not. If this is a repeat, I apologize, but he was on a hardship 10-day, and then Michael Porter Jr. cleared the health and safety protocols, even though he's one of those guys who's injured and out. So the Nuggets had to waive Cousins from his hardship 10-day, re-sign him to a standard 10-day in the same day in order to have his services, because otherwise what happens is the player has to be made inactive for the rest of their period on a 10-day. So just kind of a interesting little transaction out there. The note on the DPE, though, that is interesting to me is this means that an independent medical board found it's more likely than not that Michael Porter Jr. won't return this season. And we've had some reporting, Zach Lowe was the latest, to say the Nuggets think they could get Murray and Porter both back. So, just something to keep an eye on there. We'll see. How it works, though, is if they use this DPE and then Michael Porter Jr. feels great and can play, hey, well, that's the way it goes. Lucky you. Off we go and we move on with that. So, just something to keep an eye on for Denver.
Right. Absolutely. Last couple things. Heat signed Chris Silva to a 4th 10-day contract. OKC. Fourth one. We're setting records here. Mamadi Diakite also signs to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, a couple of depth pieces coming in there.
Yep. Okay, 10-day season for sure. Those will slow down a little bit here at the end of the week as teams reprioritize roster spots and the like going into the trade deadline. But yeah, for now, and it's not a big deal because you just cut the guy if you need to. He still gets his full amount, and you reopen your roster spot.
All right. Let's get into some buyers and sellers here. Let's start with the Eastern Conference. What do we want to do is kind of move teams into separate categories here. Now, I do think that there are subcategories as well. You have buyers and sellers. You have teams who are buyers, but they're playing so well. Like the Phoenix Suns would be a great example of this. But they're playing so well that there's not a whole lot of urgency there. If the right deal comes along, they're a buyer. You've got teams that are, we just talked about the Utah Jazz, who are struggling or kind of wanting to make that move up to where they're going to be a more motivated buyer. You've got teams who are sellers, but maybe they don't quite know it yet because they're still trying to talk themselves into being a buyer or perhaps being a playoff team. And then you've got teams that are just very clearly sellers, we're rebuilding, give us what you can, that sort of situation. So I think there's really those kind of four sub categories when we look at buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I generally tend to sort them into buyers, sellers, either or neither. And I think the either and neither kind of cover what you were covering. Well, I want to do Eastern Conference first, and we'll just go alphabetically by city. The Atlanta Hawks. So, full reference for me, I'm going to go off. I wrote an article for the Eastern Conference and one for the Western Conference over at Spot Track. You can find both of those there. The list, where I see each team. The Atlanta Hawks, I had in the either category. Now, full disclosure, this was written before the Hawks went on this 7-game win streak and look like the Hawks of last year again. But my thought process was they're not going to blow it up, but if the right deal comes along, they might get involved and make it, even if that involves moving some guys, because that'll rebalance their roster cap sheet moving forward.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the Hawks, this 7-game win streak definitely helps them out, but we've heard a lot of rumors about John Collins particularly being on the move. They're a team that I think could still look at shaking things up. I think this 7-game winning streak will give them pause before they do anything, though. They're not quite as much of a desperation buy mode as they were, but I still think they're going to be a motivated buyer if there is the right deal out there. I guess in that sense, they could sell in a roundabout way to also buy. Like if they send John Collins out, they're not going to just not replace him. They're not going to just trade him for a pick.
Correct.
They're going to try to bring in something that can help them win right now. They're not going to be in the sell and who cares if we win games mode that some other teams will be.
Yeah, exactly. Boston, Boston was a little hard to peg because they could go either way. The only thing I'm certain of is they're going to do what they can to avoid the luxury tax. They're one salary dump away from getting out of the luxury tax. What makes them a little hard to peg is we have no history, right? Because we had 20 years of history with Danny Ainge of what he might do and maybe get close to doing or whatever his favorite phrases were. With Brad Stevens, it's not, we have no history of what he might do. Although we do know he's made a bunch of trades already. So we'll see what that looks like, but it's Dennis Schroeder on the block. Mark Stein confirmed that earlier today, as many others have also said. So let's see, where they go, but they'll make at least a salary clearing trade to avoid the luxury tax. So but that's not really a sell. That's just a dump.
Yeah, I could see them going either direction here as well. So that makes sense to designate them that way. What's next? Is Charlotte?
The Berkley
Nets. I forgot all about the Nets.
Man.
I'm looking at the standings because that's what I'm using to do this.
You're going by
because that's informing my buying and selling here. I'm not going alphabetical.
So you keep looking there. I'll keep coming with the teams, just so we don't miss somebody. So the Berkley Nets, I've got them in the buyer, but without a lot to buy with. They just don't have a ton to send out. It's pretty clear James Harden trade is not going to happen. Again, for Spot Track, I wrote all about the James Harden situation with all the different contract things he could do now, later, later. All of those things. So if you really want to check that out and see where that's at, I'll leave you with this one little mind-blowing number. When he's 37 years old, it's highly likely James Harden's going to be getting paid $60 million plus. Yeah. But the Nets have a couple good trade exceptions, 11.5 million and 6.3 million. Those are both valuable that they could use. Nick Claxton, Bruce Brown. Let's see what happens with those two guys, because they're both due for new contracts. If they can move them, maybe that's where they go to start moving. And then Paul Millsap, if they can't trade him, he'll be bought out for sure.
Yeah, they are in my tier of teams who they're a buyer, but they also have to feel like if everybody's healthy, they have enough as is to get the job done. So they're a buyer, but they're not necessarily a desperation buyer at this point.
Yep. All right, let's go on to the Charlotte Hornets now. Hornets, I think they're buyers. They'd like to do something at the 5. That's really kind of the only hole on their roster. But what's hard is in order to do anything meaningful, they're going to have to move a productive player. They don't just have like a contract just kind of sitting on their roster that's very easily tradable. And because of that reason, I'm not so sure they'll actually do anything this year. I think they're more likely to make their play this offseason. Maybe if Miles Turner wasn't hurt, we might have seen them get involved there, but I think they'll probably stand pat.
Agreed. They're buyers for a big, and that's about it. I think that's the only move that they could potentially make. Who knows? Maybe they surprise us, but most likely, if there's a center available that makes sense, they'll pounce on that. Otherwise, I think they stand pat.
Yep. All right, Chicago Bulls clearly are buyers. They've been linked to Jeremy Grant and Harrison Barnes. Both they'd both be huge upgrades for them. That's what they're missing is a forward with a little bit of size, and then bench shooting. Barnes kind of fills both. The guys that they could probably most likely move are Patrick Williams and Kobe White. If they really wanted to go in, my opinion is go. You're really close to being a title contender. Go all in and make that move and go go after it and worry about the rest of it later. But we'll see where they go.
They are absolutely buyers, but injuries might push them not necessarily to be desperation, but more motivated buyers than some of the other teams that are around them, or a typical team that has the record and the standing that they have would be. They would feel a lot better about their situation if they were able to land a piece like you were talking about, because they've been dealing with a number of injuries throughout the season. That would go a long way towards helping them.
Absolutely. All right. Next, Cleveland Cavaliers. We know the situation. They're buyers, but they're, it's basically Ricky Rubio is the piece that they're shopping out there. They've got all their own picks too, plus an extra pick coming that they could move. So yeah. So let's see, where they go. We've heard Karis LeVert. We've heard any other number of guards, wings with some size. So yeah, I mean, clearly buyers for sure.
Yep, buyers. Let's go for it. Make a push. Let's go, Cavs. I think they probably need to make a move, but and I think they'll find something. I think they'll get something done.
Hey, if the Bengals can make the Super Bowl, the Cavs can make the finals.
Good point.
That's what we're living in. Detroit Pistons. This is not the last couple of years of everything must go, sell off like they've had, but they'll move Jeremy Grant, I think, if they find the right deal. If not, maybe this summer. They tried to get Bol. That's kind of where they're at, is just keep take a flyer type of move. We've heard Marvin Bagley linked to them a whole bunch of times, but that's not a real buy move. That's just more of a, hey, we're sending you something and this is what we'd like back. So sellers, but not like it was a couple years ago where it's like, let's clear the decks.
Yep, this team is in asset accumulation mode. Very much a seller and seeing what they can get in terms of future pieces.
Yep, and I said for Spot Track, the Pacers might have borrowed the "everything must go" sign from the Pistons because that's kind of where they're at. Is there was Miles Turner, Karis LeVert, Domantas Sabonis. We've also heard TJ Warren occasionally mentioned. We talked about Justin Holiday earlier today. So let's see. The thing we know is Sabonis, they want a lot for him. Turner, they're asking quite a bit for. Karis LeVert it's interesting phrasing of they're hoping to get 2 first-round picks, much like I am hoping to wake up, 50 pounds lighter. But it is, let's see, where that goes. But definitely, if there's a team in the East that is going to be making moves, it's the Indiana Pacers. They're going to look at least somewhat different, even if injuries have kind of maybe wrecked things a little bit for their trade plans moving forward.
Yep, have to imagine they're one of the busiest teams in terms of incoming phone calls over the next couple of weeks here, or a week and a half or so that we've got. The Pacers are absolutely a team that's they're looking to move off of players, and rightfully so. I think they should.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a chunky lemon milk. It's time. Miami Heat. So the Heat are definitely buyers. Their problem is they have nothing to buy with left, unless they're really going to move Duncan Robinson. Their other tricky thing is they're hard capped, and they're only about $6.5 million under the hard cap. So that limits them in how much salary they can even take in trades. So I think they're probably just going to stand pat, hope for better health, get their guys ready, be ready to make a deep run in the postseason. What I wrote for Spot Track was keep an eye on Victor Oladipo, not as a trade piece, but just he's kind of maybe their acquisition of sorts, because they get him back, and if he can play well and give them some minutes off the bench, that fills a need that they maybe would have otherwise had to go get on the market. And then Duncan Robinson, this has been more of a recent thing since I wrote that article. it's been floated enough out there that there's probably something to that. I think Tyler Hero, Max Strus playing really well. That's lessened the reliance on Duncan Robinson. I just think they've built so much of their offensive system around his gravity that it's I don't know that that's something you move on now. Maybe this offseason though, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Pretty easy one. I mean, they're definitely buyers if there's a deal out there. I don't know that there is, but if something falls into their lap, of course they're going to look at it. But they also got to be feeling good given the health concerns that they've had over the season and the fact that they're sitting in the 1 seed right now, regardless.
Yep. Milwaukee Bucks, definitely buyers
Mhm.
looking for a center. We know that they're trying to take some of that pressure off Bobby Portis while Brook Lopez is still out. A lot of people saying, maybe Robin Lopez finds his way back there if he doesn't want to stay in Orlando. We'll see. I mean, he seems very happy here in Orlando, so I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, if they can get a very cost efficient, cheap center, they'll go get it done.
Yep, absolutely buyers for the Bucks.
Yep. Talked a lot about the Knicks, so we can go through this very quick, but who knows, right? They're we don't know what they're doing. They haven't had the season they wanted. They're welcome or said to be welcoming of moving Fournier or Walker or even Alec Burks. But the Knicks have been very patient, as we talked about under Leon Rose. So I don't know that they're gonna do we talked in depth about Russell Westbrook and that being kind of say, yep, that's exactly the kind of move the Knicks will make. Now, I don't think they're in position to do a move like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a team that needs changes, but I don't think they're going to force it. I don't think they're going to force. As disappointing as the season has been, if there's something out there that makes sense, I think they'll do it. I think they'll be a buyer in the right situation, but they really need kind of a shuffling of what they've got. Something isn't clicking right in New York, and if they can figure out a way even to do a neutral move, it might actually help them just by kind of, I don't know, getting rid of some of the stale air that seems to be there in
Sure.
New York. And they're not the only team that's in that situation right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you can rebalance, great. That's I think the idea. But yeah, let's see, where that goes. All right, we are moving on to breaking news.
Uh-oh.
Joe Ingles torn ACL. So nothing beyond that, just the torn ACL. That was Woj just tweeted that. So
We knew.
bummer. Yeah. All right, Orlando Magic. Definitely sellers. They'll move Terrence Ross. They'll move Gary Harris if they can. I think Harris's contract is interesting because what happens with him is that could be your avenue to taking on. He's not going to get you a first-round pick himself, but if you took on a contract that runs into next year, that's some questionable money. That could be how you could plus up the return for Harris. Ross, my guess is returns the Evan Fournier like package of a couple seconds, and that'll be where that'll go. And then Robin Lopez, let's see, as I mentioned before, if anything happens, they have a $17.2 million trade exception. They're also $23 million under the luxury tax. It's not Oklahoma City territory. We'll get to them now in a bit when we talk to West, but that is close, right? That is that gets you into, hey, we could be a third team in on just about any trade to help facilitate. So that's something to keep an eye on with the Magic for sure.
Yeah, I mean they're a seller. They're definitely in future asset allocation mode, and that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to see what they can get for some of these guys. You mentioned Terrence Ross. I think he's a name that's certainly out there and was out there last year too. But again, I don't think that they necessarily have to send out players like you mentioned that they've got the ability to absorb some salary, and that could allow them to be maybe the third team in a deal, even if they're not the key party in a trade here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, let's see, where it goes in Orlando. I think they're going to be busy. They've been busy at the trade deadline in the past too. Moving on to Philadelphia, they've got this Ben Simmons guy. I don't know if you ever heard of him. We'll see if anything happens there. But my guess is what's reality for them is taking the Simmons situation completely out of the mix. They'll be buyers because that's what Daryl Morey does. He tinkers around the edges of his rotation. He'll look for upgrades. They could definitely use another shooter. They could use a little bit more size on the wing. Maybe even another forward type player if they can get it. So I think we'll see Morey do something for sure. I just don't know what it'll be. And I don't know that it'll be anything that changes anything with the Simmons situation. I think that'll stay just as it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing more and more that they are, as much as we think they are sellers with Ben Simmons, it sounds more and more like they are holders for Ben Simmons, or maybe actually holders for James Harden. Maybe some stuff going on there for the offseason, but other than that, you're right. They are a buyer. They're sitting in the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. If there's an opportunity for them to get better in the here and now, they will take it. They want to do what they can to maximize Joel Embiid's success here in an MVP potentially season. But yeah, I don't know if the Simmons thing is going to happen or not, especially if they, wink, wink, happen to know that somebody might be coming in the summer. Then maybe we see Ben Simmons just out the entire season and then find his way elsewhere during the summer.
Read more at Spot Track from me about how that wink wink player could work in Philadelphia and what the best path forward would be, because it is not a straight trade, nor is it a sign and trade. That's all I'll say. If you want to know the rest, you got to go read the article. All right. Toronto Raptors, as we're going to close out the East, and then we'll get to the West on a future episode. Toronto, I don't know. I don't know what to say with them. I would say they could be buyers. I mean, but I could also see Masai Ujiri saying, I don't care about the play-in. Like, that's not where we want to be. Let's move. Let's get some guys. I think it's probably likely, other than maybe something with Goran Dragic, if they can do something there, they probably just sit it out. I don't think they have any interest in moving any of their starting 5 guys. So Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes, Trent, or Van Vliet. I think they like the way those guys play together. And I think if anything big comes, it'll come this offseason for Toronto versus within the next week or so.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, the Raptors are the team that really could, I mean, they could find themselves in either direction. They could sell, they could buy. I'm trying to predict them. They're probably the toughest out of all these teams to figure out exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, because they're not contenders, but they're also not bad. They, it's tough. All right, Team Turmoil.
Oh.
Have become. They were 10-3 earlier this year. Since then, they have gone 13-23. They have slipped to 3 games under 500. They are now 11th in the East after once being first in the conference. They have a 5-game losing streak. They are negative 2.5 net rating on the year. It's just bad. And now you have Spencer Dinwiddie coming out and saying, you want to ask, like, hey, how do you provide leadership? And basically saying, yeah, I tried earlier and it wasn't welcome. No one wanted to hear it. Like, that is not good. I think we got moves coming here. I don't think it's Bradley Beal. I think he sticks. I think they're going to try to do what they can to reset around Bradley Beal. But I think everybody else pretty much is on the table there. They benched Daniel Gafford this weekend and said that'll stick moving forward. That's odd considering they just signed him to a new contract. Now, is that a let's showcase Thomas Bryant or Montrezl Harrell move? Maybe because they know they've got Gafford locked up for a couple of years, but they got to do something in that forward group. They have way too many 3s and 4s that are not really 5s and not really 3s. Some of them can play the 5s. So, it's just very overly stuffed between, I should have said 4s and 5s and not 3s and 4s, but whatever. It's too many guys for too few rotation spots. I think we're going to see Washington make a bunch of moves to kind of reset and really try to set themselves up to build around Bradley Beal this summer.
Agreed. I think that this is a motivated buyer. This is a team that is hurting right now. They're a team that's lost a lot of games, that already experienced success. They've got the pressure from Bradley Beal to get that success again. I think they're motivated to make a move and to make something that is impactful happen. They've got movable pieces, so we'll see if they can get something done. But I do expect something to happen in Washington.
Yeah, it's bad there right now. So let's see where that goes. So that takes us through the East. We'll get to the West on a future episode for sure, as we're definitely running a little long here today, but we'll get to the Western Conference on a future episode and bring you everybody there as we run through that. As we kind of touched on before, we've seen some movement in the standings, which maybe moves to how some of these teams approach the trade deadline. We're a week and a half away, getting close now.
That's right. That's right. Almost that time. All right, everybody. We will get to the Western Conference. Maybe it'll be tomorrow's show when we get to that, but we'll see. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you are following us wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is. Make sure you follow us there. And also subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Ring that notification bell as well. Till next time, everybody. Stay safe and see ya.